Thank you, Marg, for joining us this evening to present Demystifying Safety Code 6, Steps to Fix the 6. The science is clear. We look forward to hearing the evidence and call to action solutions. Marg Friesen has an Honors Bachelor of Science degree in zoology and a Master's of Science degree in entomology toxicology. She worked as a biologist for the federal government for more than 30 years in a wide range of environment-related projects, including ecosystem toxicology with pesticides and heavy metals, as well as in the development and application of DNA methodology for population genetic studies on Arctic marine animals. Since retirement from the public service, she has focused on issues related to wireless radiation. Marg's publication record includes a review paper on the effects of non-ionizing electromagnetic radiation, or EMFs, on invertebrates, including pollinators. She has submitted numerous briefs to various levels of government, including on accessibility and environmental protection legislation and Health Canada's Safety Code 6. She worked 6 years with accommodations for electrosensitivity symptoms until retirement. Marg is a director of the Environmental Health Association of Manitoba and on the Canadians for Safe Technologies leadership team and working group, as well as C4ST's Environment and Biodiversity Science Advisor. Thank you so much, Marg, for joining us this evening.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. So I'll dive in. I want to talk about two things. Just this recorded part will just be the first part, Demystifying Safety Code 6, Steps to Fix the 6. We thought we'd try to get a snappy little title there. And also Evicted by Wireless, Seeking Solutions for Canadians. So I'll talk about that later. It's a fundraiser that we've started to make a documentary about the situation here of people who have lost their homes or about to lose their homes because of cell towers that are put up too close to them. Next slide, please. So this is was intended to be a part of a series. I've expanded part 1, focusing on cell tower radiation, but we will be doing a series on Safety Code 6. It's only 18 pages long, but there's information on there that I think people should become familiar with. Next slide, please. So Shelley's gone through my background. I've got a strong background in research, and also a year as a technician in cancer research. And I've been a volunteer with Canadians for Safe Technology since 2013. Next, please. So a bit of an outline here. So I'll talk about the sources of wireless radiation. So we use wireless radiation because people can relate to it better than radio frequency electromagnetic radiation or fields of EMR or EMFs. So I'll use them interchangeably. So the main topic is Safety Code 6, SAR and power densities, and also I'd like to touch on the complement for 5G technologies that Health Canada has published. The science is here. Health Canada's limits need to be made more protective. Now we need the political will. And I'll go over some steps to fix Safety Code 6 and the complement. And then we'll have a discussion. So we usually don't tape the discussion, but so I'm looking forward to that very much. Next, please. Fixing Safety Code 6. The science is clear, political will is needed. I'm putting this at the front and because I think it's important for people to have an idea of what it is that needs to be done or what they might be able to do while they're listening to what I'm presenting. So first of all, to write to the Minister of Health and the health critics of the opposition parties and your members of parliament, this is a federal issue, not that we can't do things on a local level as well, but it's primarily has to be fixed at the federal level. Talk to candidates running in the upcoming election. This is the prime opportunity to hear your voice, to have your voices heard. This is the time when people are listening. And we'll be talking more about that. We're doing a campaign called Candidates Who Care about health and the environment, and I'll go into that in more detail after this talk. Some of the things that can be done is Auditor General environmental petitions, this typo there, But these are petitions that you don't have to have people sign. These are petitions individuals and groups can do. And this is where we've gotten a lot of good information. Very simple to do, preamble, some questions to certain departments, and then the department is required to reply in 120 days. Also, we get information, access to information requests. And of course, I hope that you will consider joining C4ST. We've got a lot of projects on the go, and we could use a lot of help, especially now if you only have a limited time. Now that the election's coming up, this would, we do need volunteers to work in a number of different capacities. Next, please. Cell towers. So these are primary sources of wireless radiation. There's a picture of a macro cell tower. There's many different kinds. In Canada, there are more than 50,000 cell towers. In the 1980s, 1990s, there were hardly any. So it just really escalated rapidly. There are just under 2 million transmitters. This is data from Innovation, Science, and Economic Development, the department that oversees the regulation of cell towers and other wireless radiation infrastructure. We shorten it to ICED. So that's about 1 transmitter for every 20 people. Next, please. So this is pictures of what some of the other antennas look like, and they're coming up on lampposts, utility poles, sides of buildings, rooftops. Many times people don't even know what they look like. So it's really important for people to educate themselves about that. And I didn't put this in my talk, but one of the best things you can do is actually get an EMF meter or a detector to be able to see where these things are. You'd actually be amazed, especially if you live in a highly populated area. Next, please. This is an example from BC. I see I misspelled Ridge, but anyway, it's Maple Ridge, BC. And here we have, it looks like a fairly rural area, 5 homes, at least 3 cell installations in every utility pole. And people may not even be aware they're there because they don't have to be labeled. And no public consultation is required if these antennas are put on non-tower structures, which is what utility poles and lampposts are. Next, please. So why do we have so many cell towers? It's because of all of the wireless devices. So cell phones, smartphones, tablets, there are tremendous number of wireless devices out there. If you just start kind of paying attention, you'll be amazed. Next, please. So we have smart meters as well. There's millions across Canada. Next. And of course, they've got low orbit satellites, and there's tens of thousands and more coming. Yikes. Next, please. So what's driving a lot of this is what's called the Internet of Things. So the slogan for the wireless industry in the US is wireless everything. So basically anything that can be connected wirelessly, the intention is that it will be. And so by 2030, there'll be more than 50 wireless devices per person on Earth. And of course, we don't go into alternatives, but certainly we do have alternatives like wired connections and fiber optics, which would certainly reduce our exposures. Next, please. So there are many scientists who are independent of industry influence, who have spoken out about this particular issue and have made a statement that RF, radiofrequency EMFs, have been proven to be harmful for humans and the environment. There's a 5G appeal, which is an international appeal, and it's been presented to a number of bodies, but so far there hasn't been uptake by the authorities that could actually bring change. So we also have an appeal. It's called the Suspend 5G Appeal and Choose Fiber Optics in Canada. So there'll be a link later, or I can provide that to you if you get a hold of me. So we're asking Canadians to sign. We've got over 20,000 Canadians who've signed that. And you have an option of not only signing, but also ticking a little box, and it'll send you to, it'll send a message to your member of parliament that this is something that you are concerned about and that you would like to have them pay attention to. Next, please. So if you're looking for the substantiation for those statements, you can go to a publication that's been put out by a recently formed International Commission on the Biological Effects of Electromagnetic Fields. They talk about the scientific evidence and it validates the health assumptions of the FCC and ICNIRP. Health Canada's guidelines are very similar to those. Next, please. So why are we worried? Certainly cancer is something that there have been many papers that have actually linked or provided evidence linking exposure to wireless radiation to, and cancer, initiation of cancer. And in 2011, the World Health Organization's International Agency Research on Cancer classified it as a possible carcinogen. And many scientists are saying it now should now be classified as a known carcinogen. Next, please. So when the classification was done back in 2011, it was based mostly on human studies. The animal studies were lacking. We now have two major groups that have done studies, large animal studies, with clear evidence of carcinogenicity. So had this evidence been there in 2010 or whenever it was, these working groups got together, it could very well have been bumped up to a probable carcinogen, and many scientists now say it should be bumped up to a known carcinogen. Next, please. So we know there's a strong evidence of breast cancer and sperm damage, and the sperm damage is pretty rock solid, and I just don't understand how it can be ignored and why we're not being told more about how to take precautions. Next, please. Of course, there's also electrosensitivity, headaches, sleep difficulties, heart effects, ear ringing. And these are, we hear about people around the world who have this particular condition. Next, please. So there have been no studies that have been conducted in Canada on possible health effects on people living close to cell towers, even though the government of Canada makes billions of dollars from the licensing of frequencies for cell tower and other wireless devices. Next, please. So what is Health Canada's role? Health Canada is responsible for helping Canadians maintain and improve their health. It ensures that high-quality health services are accessible and, importantly, is supposed to work to reduce health risks. Next, please. So they published this document. It's 18 pages long. Limits of human exposure to radio-frequency electromagnetic radiation energy, in the frequency range from 3 kilohertz to 300 gigahertz. Next, please. The last publication was in 2015, by the way. So I believe, and many others, C4ST, and many scientists believe that Safety Code 6 is inadequate to protect human health and needs to be fixed. So these are the major shortcomings for cell tower radiation, which is far field, based only on thermal effects, based on 6-minute exposure periods, uses time average power density. And something else I want to mention, although it's not cell tower radiation, but important to mention, people need to know about, is the complement for 5G technologies that has severe shortcomings. Next, please. So here's the table of contents. I'm going to touch on the preface, the purpose of the code, power density, a few definitions, and then the references. Next, please. So this is my simplification of some of the definitions. We're going to be aiming for table 5 of Safety Code 6. So these are things that will provide some background on that particular table. So they talk about basic restrictions, which are based on actual internal quantities in the body, but they're hard to quantify. And therefore, Health Canada uses reference levels, which are easily measured or calculated, and are expressed in power density or watts per meter squared. There's also specific absorption rate, SAR, and it's used for devices close to the body except for 5G technologies, which uses power density. I'll go into that a little bit more. So this specific absorption rate, I'm not going to talk about it much in this talk. It's what's used for compliance purposes for cell phones, smartphones. And if you look in the user manual, you'll see that it'll have some particular specific absorption rate. Now, we've had an individual here in Canada who's done a lot of freedom of information requests. It's taken her a long time, and she has found that basically most of the cell phone models, that if they were measured next to the head or next to the body, that they would exceed safety code 6 levels. And what happens is some of these phones have been banned in France and other places, but they haven't been banned in Canada. So there's a very important story to be told here, and certainly something that needs to be looked at in terms of other shortcomings of safety code 6, but that's for another time. Another definition, uncontrolled environment, is basically for the general public. So for people who work around these devices and equipment, so it would be like a cell phone cell transmitter, installers, they work in a controlled environment. Apparently they know about all of the risks and know how to mitigate them. So just to keep in mind, when you see uncontrolled, it's actually for a non-controlled environment where people aren't as educated and notified about the exposures that they'll be experiencing. Next, please. So the preface. The purpose of the code is to establish safety, I'm quoting here, the purpose of the code is to establish safety limits for human exposures to radio frequency fields in the frequency range from 3 kilohertz to 300 gigahertz. The safety limits in this code apply to all individuals working at or visiting federally regulated sites. These guidelines may also be adopted by the provinces, industry, or other interested parties. So in other words, these guidelines are very limited, and entities such as bodies such as school boards don't have to follow Safety Code 6. They can have much safer limits. And some of us have worked very hard to educate school boards on this, and trustees. They just seem to always fall back, Safety Code 6, Safety Code 6. The other important thing to know is that Safety Code 6 itself does not have the force of law, except in federal facilities. Now, what gives it the force of law here in Canada is that ISED, the department that regulates cell tower installations and other wireless devices, has adopted Safety Code 6 as its standard. And so it always says it's safe. If it's under Safety Code 6, then don't worry, it's all good. You know, Health Canada has done its job, and we don't have to worry. And so what happens is when people object to a proposed cell tower, they get the runaround. So ISED says go to Health Canada, Health Canada says go to ISED, and then the politicians say go locally, you have to talk to your local people, the local people say, oh, you have to go federally. So it's a real runaround, and something that we have spent a tremendous amount of time on, helping people to educate them about risks to cell tower radiation and what they can do about it. Again, there's lots in the Suspend 5G appeal that we have here in Canada on that. Next, please. This is on page 2. Despite the advent of numerous additional research studies on RF fields and health, the only established adverse health effects associated with RF field exposures in this frequency range is the occurrence of tissue heating and nerve stimulation from short-term exposures. That's it. So the Health Canada will say, well, we've looked at everything, and we have considered all of the effects, and not a problem. But the thing is that they use the word established. So people seem to think that, oh, they've looked at everything, but really that Safety Code 6 is established on all of these health evidence of adverse health effects, when in fact all they're doing is looking at adverse health effects from heating. And at the very low frequencies that aren't used for telecommunications, they also recognize peripheral nerve stimulation. And as we know, some people with electrosensitivity, that's exactly what they experience, is peripheral nerve stimulation. And where the science is to show that that isn't occurring at the higher frequencies, I would like somebody to show me. So I'll go on. At present, there is no scientific basis for the occurrence of acute, chronic, and/or cumulative adverse health risks from RF field exposures at levels below limits outlined in Safety Code 6. Now, the following is how they write up all of the science showing adverse effects. The hypotheses of other proposed adverse health effects occurring at levels below the exposure limits outlined in Safety Code 6 suffer from a lack of evidence of causality, biological plausibility, and reproducibility, and do not provide a credible foundation for making science-based recommendations for limiting human exposures to low-intensity RF fields. And then they go on to reference ICNIRP, which is the International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection. And we know that they're very industry friendly. They've got links to industry, and they only recognize thermal effects as being harmful above limits, which the recommendations are very similar to Health Canada. And also to the IEEE, which I won't go into, but it's also believe or it only what's the word? It adheres to the thought that only heating can harm above the safety code limits, or the limits here and in the US. Next, please. So here's the electromagnetic spectrum. Like, you know, this is something that's, you know, we should be really learning more about this in school. So there are two portions to the electromagnetic spectrum. There's the ionizing, which is X-rays, and then the non-ionizing, which includes at the lower level household electricity, and then high tension wires that that bring the power, hydropower to many people. And then there's the radio frequency. Now the radio frequency ranges from 3 kilohertz to 300 gigahertz. And the waves vary depending on the frequency. So at 300 kilohertz, that's the lower limit for Safety Code 6. They're 100 kilometers long, and at 300 gigahertz, they're 1 millimeter long. So when you hear about millimeter waves, we're talking about the higher gigahertz region of the electromagnetic spectrum. So we have this one safety code, which covers a very huge range of types of wavelength. And we're not even, that isn't the only thing that needs to be looked at. There's polarization and coherence and a number of other things. So it's very complex. Next, please. So one simple way to think about EMR is sort of like a fish in water. We are, it's all around us, and we, the sources, we get electromagnetic radiation from the sun, as we know. We have electromagnetic fields in the earth. And like gravity, we cannot see, smell, taste, or hear EMR, but it's just as gravity is. It's just part of our lives, and we have evolved. Life has evolved with electromagnetic radiation. So the problem is that the radio frequency radiation that we're actually exposed to right now, primarily from the sun, is very, very low. It's extremely low. what's gotten to be extremely high is the artificially man-made or anthropogenic, or whatever you want to call it, electromagnetic radiation. And if somebody's using a cell phone, they could be experiencing levels that are quintillion times above natural levels. So we're experiencing extremely high levels. And what can happen is, as many engineers know, or technicians, electronic technicians know, that electromagnetic fields can interfere with equipment, electromagnetic interference. And one simple way to think of it is, I mean, why would we think that we would be exempt? Why would we think that we can't, possibly be affected by this? But in fact, one very simple way to look at it, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, is basically what's happening now is we reach the tipping point where the fields are so high that it's affecting our own inner electromagnetic fields. We know we're electrical because through brain EKGs and EEGs rather, and the heart EKGs. We're electrical. Every living cell communicates with very fine electromagnetic signals. So it should not be any surprise that at one point we would be reaching a threshold, and that seems to be what's been happening. And people with electrosensitivities are probably the canaries in the coal mine here. Next, please. So Safety Code 6, pages 8 and 9. This is what I'm going to talk about next. Next slide, please. So this is table 5, and I think it's very key to realizing how inadequate this guideline is. So I've taken the table and I've added a bunch of stuff, mostly in red and in orange. Now, it's very clear to see if you go over to the box on the left. So those are the G's. Those G's there stand for generations. So what's happening is in the lower generations of wireless technologies. So we started out with 1G, then went to 2G, 3G, 4G, and now we're going into 5G and even the higher G. So those are generations, not to be confused with gigahertz. So the frequencies that are relevant to us for communications there are with the little red arrow. And if you go over to the right, you can see under reference period that it's only exposures of 6 minutes that they're that they're basing this on. And the body, if the body tissue, if there's no more than 1 degree of heating within a period of 6 minutes, the assumption is that if it does not overheat within 6 minutes, this radiation will not harm. So they've taken these frequencies that go from 100 kilometers long to 1 millimeter long, and somehow they seem to think that a 6-minute exposure where the body doesn't heat more than 1 degree, or localized area, so it's either 1 gram or 10 grams, doesn't heat within more than 1 degree within 6 minutes is not a problem. So anyway, it's actually quite amazing to think that that's what's being used to tell us that this is a safety code. Next, please. The other problem is that averaging is used. So you see averaging when you go into the notes for table 5, that these values are average. Next, please. Okay, so this is a diagram that was supplied by Safe Living Technologies, and you can see that the peaks, there can be peaks generated from certain devices, which are shown in blue, and then in green is what happens when they're averaged. So the green line is when Safety Code 6 averages. The peaks are what our bodies are exposed to and sensitive to, not taken into account in Safety Code 6, and is a huge flaw. So this is for far field, which means more than 2 meters distance from the body. So one way to think of this is peaks versus averages and slaps versus taps is kind of how I've summarized it. So if somebody were to clap their hands like this for 6 minutes, and then you would take that energy and condense it into, you know, all that energy once in 6 minutes, you would get something like, if not longer. So, you know, this is what our bodies are exposed to and can react to. So it's those sudden peaks that can really be injurious to our health, and that certainly need to be studied more, but certainly we should be protected from them now instead of averaging them out. Next, please. All right, I want to touch a little bit on the complement to Safety Code 6. In 2015, when the Health Committee studied Safety Code 6, they came up with recommendations. Recommendation 6 was that they were supposed to be transparent in terms of how they were setting their limits. Well, lo and behold, and that Safety Code 6 was mentioned. So, and it was unfortunate because what should have been said is radio frequency limits. But so what happened in early January of 2021, they came out with a complement. And this was just stumbled upon by one of our members. And basically what it is a revision or an addition to Safety Code 6. But it was called, and they didn't even name it. It just came out. So anyway, this is for exposures of 5G technologies close to the body, which are 6 to 300 gigahertz. And the Health Canada report itself, so I just have a little summary there on the side. So what they did is they used the only effects on humans relied on were overheating effects and pain sensation. There were 10 studies that were 30 minutes or less exposure times. All animal studies, which were 12, were short-term studies, and none were considered to be of high quality. Some of them, if not all of them, by the way, showed adverse effects. And the findings from tissue and cell studies were excluded from the analysis. So they did this comprehensive analysis of the literature, and they excluded the cell and tissue studies, and then they did not consider the animal studies. So they just considered 10 studies, all less than 10. And they increased the limit. So in the report, now you can find this on the website, but what they don't provide, they just provide an abstract of this particular report, the assessment of potential adverse health effects from exposure to RF EMF at frequencies from 6 to 300 gigahertz. It's a long report, and it's all about temperature. So they take these assumptions that of safety, and then they, you know, talk about that in the rest of the report. On page 32, now this is a comprehensive study done by Health Canada. It says there are no human studies were identified that assessed endpoints such as cancer, ocular effects, reproductive system effects, impacts on the immune system, non-specific symptoms, or any other adverse health outcome. So basically, okay, next slide, please. I kind of sum it up on this one, I think. So basically, really, lack of evidence is not proof of safety. So instead of doing the testing that should have been done to indicate there was safety, they basically say, well, you know, we didn't find any science that showed that it was not safe. So, okay, we'll just assume it's safe, and we'll just base it on these, you know, short-term feeding studies. But anyway, next slide, please. So going back to table 5, I just pointed to, now, because of okay, we got people who know physics more than I do, better than I do. So what happens is the characteristics of these waveforms, of these frequencies, change not only over distance, but also the frequencies themselves. So what happens is that the 5G frequencies do not behave the way that the frequencies used for the 2, 3, and 4G. So instead of using SAR for close body, they use power density. And what they did is, based on what I just showed you, they doubled the acceptable limit to 20 watts per meter squared. So I would really like somebody who knows more than I do about this to dig into this, because I just don't understand how they can do this. It just, to me, it's just not logical. Next, please. Okay, so here's a timeline for Safety Code 6 and the HESA hearings. HESA is the Parliamentary Health Committee. So on the left side, Safety Code 6 was established 46 years ago, 1979. It's had a few updates, 91, 93, 99, 2009, 2015. So there's no update. I mean, there must be working on an update as we speak. So Safety Code 6 is overseen by the departments, Health Canada specifically. Now, on the other arm is the political oversight, and which is the Health Committee. Now, the Health Committee studied this in 2010, and then again in 2015, when they came up with these 12 recommendations, which by and large have not been followed. And then, it's about time to have another HESA hearing, so that we can have a really close look. When the hearings were held in 2015, there were a number of experts that testified. Health Canada nobody held their feet to the fire in terms of ensuring that they followed those recommendations. So they need to be followed up on. So as some of you know, the World Health Organization, there's different arms of the health organization. The cancer group is one group, and then there's the International EMF project. And that particular project has got close ties with ICNIRP, the group that I said before are industry friendly and only adhere to the only heating can harm under their recommendation level. So what's happened now is that particular project has organized these literature reviews. And there were, I think, 9, there may be 10, but I think there are 9 working groups that reviewed the literature, because what they're looking at is they're wanting to reevaluate, because there's so much new evidence. It's time to reevaluate the classification. So it was classified as a group 2B possible carcinogen, human carcinogen in 2011. The monograph came out in 2013. They're reviewing the literature right now. So of the 9 or 10 working groups that are looking at the literature, they excluded the scientists who believe that there are adverse effects from below limits that are due to more than just thermal effects. And on each of we don't know about all of the authors, but we do know that at least 8 of the 9 have got at least one person from ICNIRP on that particular working group. So the International Commission on Biological Effects that I mentioned earlier have written a critique, or writing critiques. They're working very hard, looking at the literature and the flaws in that. But I think what's going to happen is that as soon as, it could be as early as when the last review comes in, which could be in in a few weeks. Health Canada could very well just look at it at those reviews, which aren't finding. Okay, reviews are only really as good as the reviewers and the criteria that they set. So there are flaws in how that's been done. And what we're suspecting is that Health Canada will, when they get these reviews as early as in a month or two, will move to update Safety Code 6. So what we need to do, next slide, please. So what is needed is we need to have contact the Minister of Health, and as I said, the critics, and ask for a full public consultation, including hearings with expert witnesses from a range of perspectives, including from Canadians for Safe Technology. Frank Clegg testified in 2015, as well as individual delegations. Now, what happened last time is that the Royal Society of Canada carried out those hearings, and there was some, that was rather questionable on how they went about doing that. And we also, to address written submissions, which will be fully addressed in the rationale for changes. So I just want to mention the recommendation is 6. Health Canada this is the one from 2015. Health Canada ensure the openness and transparency of its processes for the review of Safety Code 6, so that Canadians have an opportunity to be informed with the evidence considered or excluded in such reviews, that outside experts provide full information when doing independent reviews, and that the scientific rationale for any change is clearly communicated. Well, we know Health Canada doesn't have a good track record on that, and they've already breached that in spirit anyway. I mean, it says Safety Code 6. Had it said radio frequency radiation, then they should have put the complement out for public consultation as well. Next, please. Okay, sorry, that doesn't belong there. Next. All right, I just want to end with a quote from Dr. Martin Blank. And Martin also testified at the HESA hearings. So he says, with EMF, and is now passed away, but nevertheless, his words endure. With EMF, we know that exposure of some kind is going to have its consequences biologically, and there will be a segment of the population that will succumb at some level. What we have to decide as a society, what is the level at which we want to set that at? And that's a political decision. Next, please. So there are websites where you can get more information, and we're just working on a website now for Canadians for Safe Technology. We have some sort of sub-websites until that gets going. There's the 5G appeal, which has got a lot, suspend 5G appeal, which has got a lot of information on it. There is the evicted by wireless, and we're going to have another website for the election itself. And in that election, our Candidates Who Care campaign, we're asking candidates to support 2 initiatives. One of them is to look at the impacts of technologies, wireless technologies on children, screen time, basically. And then the other one is that there are no protective laws for wildlife or any other non-human species in Canadian law. And we know there's a lot of science which indicates adverse effects, and we think that it is high time that we get some protective policies and regulations and laws for our wildlife, including our pets. So I'd like to, I don't know if I have another slide. Is there another slide there? Okay, so there we go. So thank you very much. And now we can open it up for discussion.
Thank you so much, Marg, for summarizing the huge shortcomings of Safety Code 6. As you said, like gravity, we cannot see, smell, taste, or hear electromagnetic radiation, but wireless emissions are increasing wildly. With the unchecked rapid proliferation of 4G and 5G antenna installations on land and tens of thousands of telecommunication satellites in space to support the Internet of Things, and with no monitoring or assessment of RF radiation impacts, we are concerned about the harmful effects, which are clearly established in science. As you said, the health of Canadians is essential. The lack of evidence is not proof of safety. And as you mentioned, Health Canada is responsible for helping Canadians maintain and improve their health and should ensure high quality health services are accessible and health risks are reduced. Finally, you summarize the brilliant calls to action, which include writing to the Minister of Health and the health critics of the opposition parties and your MPs, and ask for full public consultation, including hearings with expert witnesses from a range of perspectives. We encourage everyone to talk with candidates running in the upcoming election, join C4ST working groups, and we'll guide you so you can submit Auditor General Environment petitions and submit access to information requests. Together, we can push for accountability and safer public health policies. Thank you so much, Marg.